What's up, traders? Anthony Crudele here, and welcome to this week's episode of Develop Your Edge. In today's show, I'll be speaking with trader Anne-Marie Baiynd. And in my final thoughts, I'll be going over some of the products that I was talking about with Ira Harris this weekend on the podcast: Bitcoin, gold, Russell, and NASDAQ. But before we get Anne-Marie on the line, loving that we're getting a ton of new traders to develop your edge each and every week. A lot of questions about futures. And one of the best resources for new traders and all traders for that matter is activetrader.cmegroup.com. Learn about products, learn about the micros. You can see here they're talking about trading micro E-mini NASDAQ 100 versus FANG. Everything you need to know about CME Group and their products, activetrader.cmegroup.com. Let's get Anne-Marie on the line. Anne-Marie, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Happy not to be blown away from the storms.
Yeah, I know you and I are both down here in South Florida, and we were talking. Once I get my new studio coming in 2021, I think you're going to be our first in studio guest. So just put a little
I
plug out
can't
there.
wait.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
going
it's
to be
going to be
fun.
exciting. Yeah.
So, Anne-Marie, you and I have talked a ton over the years on the podcast, on other shows, a lot of conversations you and I have had. And the one question that we focus on Develop Your Edge is, what is your edge? So I want to just start today and go right into it. Anne-Marie, if somebody asked you, what is your edge? What would you say?
My edge is really thinking about price like it's people in, you know, a UFC ring, maybe. I think price and understanding what the traders are trying to do is a big part of my edge. But really, the way I formalize it is I use something called the OODA loop. And so the OODA loop, OODA, was developed by a colonel in the Air Force. His name is John Boyd. And he really developed it because a lot of pilots were crashing, and they were crashing because they did not know from a process perspective what they needed to do. And so the OODA loop says observe first. Then it says orient yourself to that observation. And once you've done that orientation, you can decide on a plan. And once you decide on that plan, you must act. And the moment you act, you turn yourself right back into the OODA loop. You observe everything post action. You orient post action. Then you say, do I need to make any adjustments? If you do, great. If not, you turn yourself right back into observe, orient, decide, act. So it's a constant motion of evaluation. Now, sometimes folks think, wow, that's like, wouldn't you be micromanaging? But you always look at it from a big picture. And so, one of my favorite things to do is look at monthly closes and weekly closes and those big levels. And then when we come into them and price begins to fight around that edge, somebody's going to win it. But people are putting their chips on the table, right? They're saying, hey, I'm making a bet that we move in X direction. I'm making a bet that we move in Y direction. But for me, I let the big bettors do their betting, and I move in just when I see who's got the real edge. And I'm always doing that by saying, wait a second, what did we just do? Did we just get up over that VWAP and make a lower high, and now all of a sudden we're fighting at that VWAP? If I had real strength, I wouldn't be fighting at that VWAP again. I'd be moving to the north. So it tells me about the combatants on the stage and whether I can say, listen, I want to stay totally exposed in the position, or maybe I just want to take a little bit of profit here. Maybe I want to shift my size relative to what my combatants are doing on these larger time frames, the 4 hour, the daily, the weekly, the monthly. And so I think across the board, that develops a very controlled approach to the market. I'm not saying, here, it's done this, I'm just going to buy, and then, hey, that was my signal, I'm going to see what happens. and just wait for it to either hit my target or go into a stop. I'm constantly engaging. I'm saying, okay, I've observed that the traders are having a battleground up over this edge. If buyers were really, really strong there, would they still be battling with the opponents and all of that supply? The answer is no. They'd be driving right through them. And so my thought is prepare by either taking some profit, lifting my stop, shifting my size, or saying, you know what, relative to everything else in my orientation event, this is still holding higher or this is still holding lower. I completely believe that once I became anchored in that OODA loop and focused only on the price action relative to its prior motion, because markets have price memory, right? The traders remember these prices. And so if I'm cognizant of that and I use the OODA loop relative to that, it really positions me well. My win rate has gotten much, much higher using that OODA loop process. It's golden.
You know what's amazing, Emery, is after all the years I've known you and after all the conversations we've had, this is the first time I'm hearing about the OODA loop. And I love it. And what really comes to my mind when I hear that is your edge, after all the statistical things and indicators that we've talked about, that's not even your edge. Your edge
Yeah.
is the OODA loop.
Yes.
And how did you get to the point of recognizing that it wasn't going to be indicators that was ultimately going to be your edge? It was going to be the OODA loop.
That is a great question, Anthony, and it really was sort of a transformation. You know, when we look at trades, we tend to look at them statically. We go, hey, I'm going to enter at this, my risk is going to be this, my reward is going to be this, and my exit is going to look like this. So it's very static, but it's in a completely dynamic world. And so what the OODA loop does is open up the decision making into a dynamic space, right? The same thing happened with these pilots. If you talk to anyone who is a pilot in any of the armed forces, they know the OODA loop backwards and forwards. And so anytime I bump into traders and they go, oh my gosh, I know the OODA loop, they've been in the military because they are made to learn it. And so, again, it's how to deal with a dynamic environment. And when I sat looking at something going, okay, well, my buy is at $1,112.54, that's a static number and it has nothing to do with the new traders that are participating at this point in time and at this moment. And so my job is to really, if I believe that's the actual price, I need to go there and see what those guys are doing and gals. Are they actually behaving like that price point that I think is the correct one actually is the right one? Because I don't have the money to move the market. And so the moment that I see big money moving the market, I can go, oh, that is still a good price. I'm going to engage here. And because I have waited for that motion to settle, those big guys in there have said, okay, here's where your risk threshold is. So it now defines my risk in the dynamic live space. It allows me to get in that dynamic live space. And now I can stair step through everything going, okay, my observation should be that I breached this number. Is it coming in there? What if it's not? What does that mean? I need to say, hey, these guys aren't as strong as they are right now. My stop is engaged. So now I can go, all right, these guys aren't really pulling in the way they're supposed to. I either leave, take the profit that I have, or trim so that I don't expose myself to a wider range of risk. It is fantastic. And literally, you can put it in any place. If you are um, if you are in some kind of negotiation, the OODA loop is going to work. Observe, orient, decide, and act. You're going to be able to read the room, as it were, if you're using that orientation space. And that's what we do naturally in a dynamic environment. We say, wait a second, that my tone or my way is not resonating with this person. I have to shift and change tack. And that's how we are naturally. And so what I did was I said, hey, why don't you just view the trading space a little bit more naturally, like you would if you were engaging with people?
It's so similar to the way I approach the market in the sense of I trade support and resistance. We've talked about this.
Yes.
I tell everybody out there all the time, watch the reactions. I tweet about this really endlessly. And I
Yes.
always say, it's not support until it is support. It's not resistance until it
Yes.
is resistance.
Yes.
So, what I want to say about this with the OODA loop is how does something like that transfer over and be applied to a strategy? Meaning this, I believe in that type of thinking as well. I trade support and resistance. Did you have to then build a strategy with your technicals that fit that style of thinking versus, some strategies can be just a trigger where it says you have to be in now or something like that. Like because you're
Right.
watching reactions, like I am, or you're doing it, calling the OODA loop.
Yeah.
I say watching reactions.
Hmm.
I have to
Yeah.
look at support and resistance. So I developed a strategy based upon that thinking. Is that how it worked for you? Or did you apply it to your strategy? It's like chicken, what came first, the chicken or the egg type
Yes.
scenario?
So, also, very thoughtful question. My suspicion is the following: using any strategy. Now, see, if you use a system, you're going to act without questioning the trigger. The difference between a system and a strategy is a strategy still allows for the personal shift of discretionary motion. A system does not allow you to do that. Systems are closed. So if it says buy, you buy. If it says sell, you sell. Most of us don't use systems, most of us use strategies. And so in a strategy, when it says, hey, this is where you're supposed to buy, that should mean that buyers are going to show up. And so either they show up right after you've made the move, or they show up just before you've made the move, dependent on your strategy. And you still can use the OODA loop for that. You can still look at it and go, okay, I know I need to take a look at this from a discretionary perspective because it says, hey, buy here. But is that measure telling me I have the right buy? Or, usually more importantly, is it designing or describing an element of risk that I cannot engage with? And that's the big thing, right? Our
Yes.
strategies can tell us buy or sell. But if that strategy does not say, listen, your risk drawdown associated with implementing this at this time, then there's the weakness in the strategy, and the OODA loop can tighten that up.
I love the way you explain that system versus strategy. And to all the traders out there, the reason I asked Anne Marie that question, what came first, kind of that chicken or the egg, is because a lot of traders out there are thinking to themselves, well, how does mental edge help me with my trading? How does that make me money? Because at the end of
Yeah,
the day, you and I have been through this to where we recognize that the strategy is only part of the entire overall process of
absolutely.
being a trader.
Absolutely.
Once you develop a strategy, then you have to go and work on that mental edge. And that kind of brings me to that
Yes.
next question I want to talk about is you have the OODA loop, you have your strategy. How much now comes down to statistical edge with your strategy, meaning that is mental edge really the true edge, or have you developed the strategy and you've gotten some statistical edge on it, and it's become less of you having to use the OODA loop because you've kind of seen scenarios over time that where it's become, I don't want to say systematic, even though we're discretionary, but you get where I'm going at with this, is to where
Yes.
once you develop something, like for me, I feel like I'm much more automatic now, and I'm using,
Right.
like, my reaction time is quicker because I see what's
Yes.
happening. Talk to us
Right.
about that.
Okay, so I would say it always boils down to the mental edge
Okay.
because unless something is making the move for you, you are always at a decision zone when it's time for execution. And so I would say the OODA loop increases the power of the mental edge by magnitudes that really were unknown to me until I started making decisions like this. It's been everybody's got a strategy about what they well, hopefully, everybody that's functioning in the market day in, day out, they have thoughts about statistically what's supposed to happen when we come into last week's low. Probabilistically, it's a value point. So, probabilistically, some people are going to come in. But the OODA loop then says, wait a second, you've been running hard and fast. You're making bigger, wider candles to the south. Don't sit in front of that in terms of a limit order. They don't have the power to break that support zone. Video. They don't have the power to break that support. He doesn't know we're on video. So sorry.
We're going to keep this one going. This could be one of those outtakes to where it was almost like where the guy had the baby in the background, but
Yes,
not quite as good.
the
But we're going to
baby
keep
that
going,
runs
Anne
in.
Marie. So finish your thought.
Okay, so the mental edge still shifts as being predominant because when we are working through the process and we're looking at those edges that are statistically sound, the OODA loop will say, wait a second, right now they're moving really fast. So that edge is going to break and then it's going to recapture. So now you sit back, wait for it to do what you know it's going to do because of the near term motion, because of what the traders are telling you, and then say, all right, now that it's holding the edge, I'm going to get in there at that low.
I agree with you on that. To me, it's about being present. And because there's
Yes.
so many situations over the time that we are traders that are very similar, but there's nothing that's like how it is right now. And for me, I feel that my edge, and I will always say my edge is my execution of my strategy. My strategy itself doesn't puke out the best statistics, and it's not the
Yeah.
best statistical edge, but when I see how it reacts and me being present in that moment and
Yeah.
seeing that situation, that is what I think separates me from, other traders. It is my execution and my edge in those moments. And just an awesome conversation today, Anne Marie. And before I let you go, you're wearing your Traders for a Cause T-shirt. I know a
Yes.
little bit about this. I've watched you tweet about this and several other traders that I follow on Twitter. Talk to everybody about what Traders for a Cause is.
Traders for a Cause is a great group where a lot of traders come together and we run charity events. And so we will give our time, our expertise, and our energy to people who um, want to see what we're doing and at the same time devote some of their funds to things like we did breast cancer, we did that was the one that I was after. What we really do is come together when we donate our time and energy, and in return, we ask folks to donate to very well known charities just to come in and see us. And so all of them are free. You can come in and look, but it's the drive to do more and it's the piece to do more. Last time I was in there, I said, hey, listen, if you donate X amount, I'm going to give you some free coaching. And I had a ton of people that said, sure, I'll do it. And so it was great for me. I got to give back while they were giving back. And so I love it. Just look for the next one. We do them about twice a year, 3 times a year.
Well, that's awesome. Very awesome of you and everybody out there that's participating in Traders for a Cause. That's fantastic. Anne Marie, it's always such a pleasure to speak with you.
I know.
I just
It's
love this
always fun.
conversation today. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're very welcome. So happy to be here. Take it easy.
Hang tight, traders. I'll be right back with my final thoughts.
24/7 access to diverse global markets. Right here.
That's why I added stock index futures to my trading strategy. Now when I see ups and downs coming, I'm ready.
Well played.
Why trade with TradeStation? It's innovative, easy to use, and totally freaking sweet. With powerful tools to track and execute your trades and low per trade commissions on stocks, futures, and options. Upgrade your trade at tradestation.com.
Final thoughts for today, traders. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Anne-Marie. And what was funny about today was that after all the private conversations I've had with Anne-Marie and the conversations I've had on the show, it's the first time I heard about the OODA Loop, and I loved it. And one of the things I really enjoyed about my conversation today with Anne-Marie is a question I get from a lot of you out there and say, Anthony, I understand that mental edge is important, but how does mental edge become the edge that helps me make money in my trading? And Anne-Marie did a fantastic job at explaining how she applies the OODA Loop to her strategy. Let's go to the charts. Now, I got a few emails over the past week or so about how my charts look after many of you have downloaded the indicators. Now, remember, you can download my indicators for free at anthonycrudele.com. And when you do, you're just going to get the regular amount of data that is set for any chart. So I have a daily up here. So I'm going to double click here on TradeStation. And I changed my data to 2 months back because markets change. 2 months ago, for what I'm looking at on my support and resistance levels, you can go back to the first show of Develop Your Edge and learn more about that. This is all I want to see for what's happening with the market right now. You can go back a little further or a little less. It's entirely up to you. For dailies and a lot of these, I like to look at just a couple of months back because I think that's just enough to look into the window of what's happening in the markets right now. It keeps me more present, as I talked about today with Anne-Marie. Now, this week on Futures Radio Show, Ira Harris and I talked a lot about what he's seeing in the global macro economy right now. And everyone knows that Ira is my top follow for that. And what we talked about were a couple of things. One, how Bitcoin, he's bullish. He and I are both bullish. We're not trading it, but I know a lot of people are trading it and looking at Bitcoin these days. And we talked about how Bitcoin is now the market that really has taken over for gold. And when it comes to hedging against central banks. And you could just see here, I'm going to get into the technical side of it, that Bitcoin is obviously been exploding. And you know I talk about my strategy when the Bollinger Bands are open, I don't fade a move like this. It is just going straight up. So currently, we talked about in the global macro environment and what I'm seeing on the charts, Bitcoin still looks very bullish to me. And once again, I'm not telling you what to think about Bitcoin. I'm teaching you how I think and how I look at it. And I just wanted to show a chart of that because we had talked about it this week on the podcast. And when you look at gold, once again, how to think, not what to think. I mean, look at gold. It just is, it's really just range bound. We talked about this in the podcast. It's hit some of my support. But when I start to see how these Bollinger Bands are not really smooth, you see how they're kind of just choppy, where it's like, oh, I want to go back up, I don't, and back and forth. We want to come back in and then we don't. This market to me tells me that the bigger players just don't have a strong hand in it. It's just really a no trade for me. And I like to know whether I want to be on a side or what side I don't want to be on. And right now, this is just a no trade. There really is no side of the market here that really has a stronger hand. And I like to show that because I think it's important to have your strategy show you sometimes when you should just be not even trading a market. Now, I'm going to pull up the Russell and I'm going to pull up the NASDAQ. Why? Because these are markets that I'm trading and I'm going to show you some thoughts I have on them. Look at the NASDAQ. So this is a NASDAQ daily 2 months back on the amount of data that I have here for my indicators. And what I thought was really interesting was the NASDAQ made that move higher. We talked about, it was in the middle of October, came back down, hit support, went back up. Bollinger Bands took out that previous peak. Remember I talked about that in one of the shows? I said eventually the NASDAQ could take out its high. It did. That Bollinger Band, after that move lower, came straight back down, and we are boxed back in NASDAQ. And just tells me right now that I think the NASDAQ, even though I'm more bullish than I am bearish because of global macro reasons and other Fed reasons, a lot of reasons, but what I'm seeing here, to me, it's a two-way trade. Still more looking for the long side. 11,649 is a big-time pivot for me, but on big breaks, 11,252, That's an area I'll be looking for longs. Now look at the Russell. When you look at the Russell, it took out that high, massive move, probably the biggest move I've ever seen in the Russell, and took out that peak Bollinger Bands going up. If you remember, what was it, maybe a couple of weeks ago, I said Russell was the two-way market. Still bullish, both of them, because like I said, of macro reasons. But now the Russell is the one that looks like it can keep going up. And I think that's important because right now, to me, the NASDAQ intraday, I probably still traded both sides, more aggressive on the long side. I talked about my big picture support, but Russell to me can continue to be in breakout mode. It's just something to watch. Once again, how to think, not what to think. Identifying, is it going to be rangy? Is it going to be choppy? How are you going to approach your day? Is the market in breakout mode? I won't look at shorts and Russell right now. And that's something I think is very important to know what side you want to be on, what side you don't want to be on, and whether a market's a choppy trade or a no trade. So that's my thoughts. And remember, if you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. You could also follow me on Twitter at Anthony Crudele. Don't forget to check out Instagram. Got some really cool stuff coming up on Instagram at Anthony C. Crudele. That's a wrap for today. See you next week.